Hello everyone. We will discuss for two countries in cope the macroeconomic problems, which is inflation and unemployment in these pandemic phases. Before we start, let's take a look at the introduction. The economic damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is largely driven by a fall in demand, meaning that there are less consumers willing to purchase the goods and services available in the global economy. Besides that, global stock markets have also suffered dramatic falls due to the coronavirus outbreak, although they were able to recover from the losses quite quickly.
Inflation is the rate of increase in price over a given period of time. Inflation is typically a broad measure, such as the overall increase in price or the increase in the cost of living in a country. Factors of inflation are Consumer Price Index (CPI), increased 2.3% in April 2022 from a year earlier, led by higher food prices, according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia. For example, food inflation in April 2022 at 4.1%, with 89.1% of food items in the CPI's food and non-alcoholic beverage. Next, private consumption dropped 4.3% in 2020 and only edged up 1.2% from January to September last year despite the low base. Employees Provident Fund (EPF) data also showed that median salaries as at mid last year had regressed by 3 years. Besides, closing all borders to combat a potential second wave of coronavirus cases in the country, and Malaysians will be barred from leaving the country during this time, and all foreign tourists and visitor entries will be banned. There are three solutions for inflation. The first, Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) of Bank Negara Malaysia decided to maintain the overnight policy rate (OPR) at 1.75%. The global economy remains on a recovery path, driven by expansion in manufacturing and services activity. In several major economies, sizable fiscal and monetary policies will continue to support the recovery momentum. Moreover, with the domestic growth on a firmer footing, the MPC decided to reduce the degree of monetary accommodation. This will be done in a measured and gradual manner, ensuring that monetary policy remains accommodative to support sustainable economic growth in an environment of price stability. Bank Negara said inflationary pressures had increased sharply due to a rise in commodity price, strained supply chains and strong demand conditions, particularly in the US. Consequently, several central banks are expected to adjust their monetary policies settings faster to reduce inflationary pressures. After that, Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz had spent more than 66% or 260 billion ringgit of the 322.5 billion ringgit allocated under Budget 2021. The government has also announced economic stimulus and aid packages worth 530 billion ringgit, which include both fiscal and non-fiscal measures. The government has funded this package through the COVID-19 fund to accommodate to the additional fiscal injection specifically to address the COVID-19 crisis. More than 330 billion, or about 62%, has been implemented, benefiting 20 million people and 2.4 million businesses.
What is unemployment? Unemployment exists when there are people who are willing and able to work but unable to find suitable jobs at certain level of wage rate. Malaysia's labour market has been impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. According to the Malaysian Department of Statistics, unemployment is expected to reach 711,000 in 2020, up from 508,200 in 2019, resulting in an increase in unemployment rate 3.3% in January 2020 to 5.3% in May 2020, before decreasing to 4.7% in August 2020. There were 7.1 million persons that were unemployed in January 2020. This number grew to 7.4 million in June 2020, then slowed to 7.35 million in August 2020. Furthermore, unofficial government figures based on a poll conducted from 23rd of March to 31st of March 2020 indicated that a considerable number of individuals had lost their employment, and many others had been impacted by having their working hours shortened or being placed on leave without pay. Similarly, employment losses surged by 42% year over year in the first quarter of 2020, according to statistics from the Employment Insurance System (EIS), and are predicted to grow by 50% to 200% each quarter in 2020. Malaysia has been adversely affected by COVID-19 and the subsequent mobility restrictions implemented to flatten the curve of the pandemic. With increase in the number of identified cases by mid-March, the government enacted the Movement Control Order (MCO) on 18th of March. During the MCO, businesses could not operate unless specifically authorized to do so. Because of the restrictions, businesses were forced to terminate their employees due to the lack of income to pay the employees, which led to the rise of unemployment in Malaysia during the pandemic. In May 2020, the MCO was replaced by the Conditional Movement Control Order (CMCO) and subsequently the Recovery Movement Control Order (RMCO) that allowed for progressively greater mobility and the resumption of economic activities. Under the CMCO and RMCO, all economic sectors has been allowed to reopen except for those on the negative list subject to COVID-19 standard operating procedures. As of 4th November 2020, some mobility restrictions and physical distancing requirements remain in place, with greater restrictions in regions with high number of cases, and many employers continue to offer or require work from home. According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, Malaysia's unemployment rate fell to 3.9% in April 2022 from 4.1% a month earlier. This is due to an increase in the country's employment numbers, while the unemployment figure fell as the economic activities flourished due to the reopening of the country's borders in tandem with its transition to the COVID-19 endemic phase on the 1st April 2022 from the previous pandemic phase. According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, Malaysia's unemployment rate in April 2022 fell below 4% for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic began in early 2020 at 3.9%. Malaysia's economy continues to grow after the country reopened its international borders at the beginning of the month. As a result, the labour force situation in April 2022 improved further, increasing by 0.4% month-on-month to 6.5 million people. As a result, the labour force participation rate increased by 0.2 percentage point to 69.4%, showing increased market involvement. The positive position resulted from the constant rise in employment while unemployment continues to decline. The first initiative is the Wage Subsidy Program. The Wage Subsidy Program is a financial help provided to employers of each firm under the kindergarten packages to ensure employees can keep their employment. The program benefited 320,177 employers and 2.64 million registered employees as of 11th of February 2022, with an authorized pay subsidy amounting to RM 12.96 billion. In line with this, RM 1.41 billion has been distributed to 81,119 employers under the kindergarten packages via the program. Furthermore, under Budget 2022, Malaysia Short-Term Employment Program (MyStep) promised 80,000 contract opportunities beginning in January 2022, including 50 positions in the public sector and 30,000 jobs in the government-linked companies (GLCs) and strategic partners. Subsequently, the Majlis Amanah Rakyat (MARA) has introduced a Professional Entrepreneur Development Program (Prospect) to provide professionals with opportunities to venture into entrepreneurship and understand the intricacies of businesses based on their expertise. The financing scheme provides up to 50,000 financing limits for revolving capital, machine purchase, equipment, or modification of business premises.
So, let me explain to you in details about the problem created by inflation during COVID-19. First, supply chain disruption and misalignment. For example, the production of parts for goods like automobiles has been decreased at times, especially in factories in Asia that play an increasingly central role in the global supply chain. Surge in demand for certain products like those that use computer chips have caused unanticipated supply constraints in industries such as semiconductors. Second, pent-up demand, especially for service, because during COVID-19, as more people get vaccinated throughout the year, however, demand for this and other high-touch service could surge and temporarily outstrip supply. Lastly, COVID-19 created longer-term inflation and expectation. Over the longer terms, a key determining price pressure is inflation expectation. When business expect a long-run price to stay around the Federal Reserve's 2% inflation target, they may be less likely to adjust price and wages due to types of temporary factors discussed earlier. So, that's all about the problem created by inflation during COVID-19.
Solution for inflation. First, open market operations. Federal Reserve increase by buying treasuries or decrease by selling treasuries, the money supply and adjust interest rates. Second, contractionary monetary policy to reduce the money supply within an economy by increasing interest rates. This helps slow economic growth by making credit more expensive, which reduce consumer and business spending. Lastly, price controls. Price caps or floors mandated by the government and applied to specific goods, which controls can be implemented in tandem with price controls to suppress which push inflation.
Next, let's take a look at unemployment in USA. Factor of unemployment during COVID-19 in USA. First, the labor market began a slow recovery that continued for the rest of the year. The unemployment rate fell to 8.8% in the third quarter and to 6.7% in the fourth quarter. This was still 3.1 percentage points higher than a year earlier and reflected the 10.8 million people who were unemployed in the fourth quarter of 2020, which was 4.9 million more than at the end of 2019. Second, the decrease in labor force participation suggests that the official unemployment rate understates the share of Americans who are out of work. Workers who left the labor force during the pandemic are not counted among the unemployed. As per usual practice, as the economy improves, many of these workers may re-enter the labor market, adding to the number currently counted as unemployed and in want of work. Third, less contribution to the economy. In addition to effect on the individual and societal level, unemployment also directly impacts the economy as a whole. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, when people are unemployed, they spend less money, which ultimately contributes to less contribution to the economy in relation to service or goods sold and produced. Problem solving of unemployment in USA. First, provide a generous tax credit for expanding employment. The federal government gives employers a 15% subsidy for increase in the employer wage bill above the prior year level in the first year and 10% in the second year. Second, government have invested massively in job retention scheme to stem job losses. In response to the COVID-19 crisis, most OECD countries took active measures to scale up existing short-time work scheme, introduce new one or create temporary wage subsidy to preserve jobs and support incomes. Third, fund direct job creation. Years ago, Canada managed to create relatively low-wage jobs by requiring non-profit sponsors to compete for funding specifying the public's goods they promised to produce, whether by path, repay, and waterization for low-income housing, recreational center, child care, or home care assistance for the elderly and disabled.
In addition, let's talk about the comparison between unemployment rate between Malaysia and USA. Unemployment rate in Malaysia. Malaysia's unemployment rate fell to 3.9% in April 2022, down from 4.6% the previous month. As the economy recovered from the coronavirus disruptions, the most recent result fell below 4% for the first time since the COVID-19 epidemic began in early 2020. Unemployment fell 12.6% year-on-year to 649.3 thousand, while employment grew 3.3% to 15.85 million. Meanwhile, the workforce increased by 2.5% to 16.50 million people. The unemployment rate was 4.1% in March 2022. Unemployment rate in USA. The US unemployment rate remained steady in May 2022 at 3.6%, the same as in the previous 2 months, the lowest since February 2020 and compared to market estimates of 3.5%. Unemployment climbed by 9,000 to 5.950 million, while employment expanded by 321,000 to 158.426 million. Meanwhile, labour force participant rose to 62.3% in May, up from a 3-month low of 62.2% in April.